We have time for a couple of questions. And also, if there's a volunteer who could run this wireless mic to folks who have questions, that would be great. Oh, thanks, Aaron. Okay, so any questions from the audience? And I should say that please don't make long comments, just ask questions, because we have limited time.
I am indigenous Chamorro from Guam, and throughout the Pacific, one of the things that our indigenous communities are struggling with is our sovereignty fights being overtaken by the creation of U.S. black sites and military prisons, and especially the young men of our communities being forced into participation in these detention economies. I have a lot of young men who come to me and ask, Auntie, I don't know what to do. I don't feel like I have any other option but to be involved in this detention economy, and I don't ever know what to say to them. I'm wondering what I can do for those of us forced to participate in this.
Hi, I just wanted to thank everybody really quickly for participating. I really enjoyed listening to you all, and I learned a lot. I think much has been made of the idea that the U.S. is often creating a lot of the threats that then they police and detain, down the line, and that spurs the creation of things like Guantanamo. I'm wondering what it looks like to allow for self-determinism. What does it look like for the U.S. to not just create power vacuums when it exits places? What does it look like for the U.S. to not intervene in conflicts that it's kind of had a foundational hand in creating? And how do we, on the ground here, help impact something that's so caught up in like the foreign policy state that most of us have zero impact on? And thank you again.
My question to you all is, what is this disposition matrix, also known as the kill list, of 2010? Because I think this has caused a lot of trouble.
So yes, this idea that people are too dangerous to release, that there's not enough evidence to try, is exactly what Guantanamo is about. And I think a way to disrupt the narrative is to say, like, the narrative's bullshit. Like, with Guantanamo, and again, the government controls the narrative. So for a long time, attorneys knew that their clients were cleared for release, which meant all the government agencies had a stake in national security, had approved them for transfer. But that information was protected, so it couldn't go beyond a very small group of people. So when you're trying to get your client resettled to a third country, if they can't return home, or you want to talk to the media about it, you can't say that fact that the government approved my client for transfer. You have to go around it. He's never been charged, never been accused of X. And then, at some point, I don't know if it was around the 2013 hunger strike, maybe through a FOIA process, that information became public. So now you could talk about it. Then there were the people who were cleared for transfer and the people who weren't. And then there was the periodic review board process that went underway under the Obama administration to support his desire to close the prison. And that was kind of like a parole-like hearing, and people made their case. This is what I'll do when I'm released. I'm not a threat. This is what I believe, etc. And dozens of people were approved by that process. So before they were cleared by the PRB, they were considered this indefinite detention category, not cleared and not charged. And then slowly they became cleared, and then they were released. So, I think that there is always going to be a narrative that suits what the government wants to do, and I think we saw that under Obama. He wanted to close the prison, he was committed to doing it, and the processes supported that vision. And then under Trump, the periodic review boards, if they're happening at all, mean nothing. It means nothing to be cleared for release, like the 5 men who are, because they're not going anywhere. So, and the prisoners themselves have decided not to participate because it's. So I think that the thing with the narrative It's unfortunate that it's very much connected to like legal agreements that the U.S. has the right to detain people as long as war continues, and the U.S. will say, well, we've determined the threat levels here, and we're not going to clear them right now, and we're not going to charge them. It's just this limbo. I mean, essentially right now, everybody who's there, whether you were charged with a crime or you're cleared for release, is a forever prisoner. And so, I think to answer that, disrupting the narrative is really important and saying, well, it doesn't really matter if you're not cleared, for example, like you should go home, you should be released. Like there are only a handful of people who are in the commissions process. I think that number is around 7. Everybody else should be able to go home. And we're talking about 40 people, which is like half of you, or half of you. There are more people here than there are in Guantanamo, to put that in perspective. So, and then on the piece about supporting the prison complex, I don't have an answer for you, but more recently I've been wondering how to make connections across like the capitalism that drives Guantanamo. I think that there's been a lot of great work happening in the US around targets for migrant detention, mass incarceration as well. But I actually don't know like who's benefiting from Guantanamo. And it right now costs about $13 million per prisoner. That's how much Guantanamo costs per year, and the less men who are left, the more per detainee it is. And so someone's benefiting from that, right? And so I think one way forward, at least, is to do the work to find out more about that, because I think we know that a lot of those names there are going to be the same names within the United States, and hopefully make the connections with people who are organizing domestically.
Yeah, and I just want to second that if there's any place to make someone anti-American, is to send them into American prisons. That's a very good way of creating radicals. So your question back there, I'm trying to like figure out how a way to answer it, and I think the way you're framing it is what it would look like if America did not intervene in these countries. I mean, I think it would be much better for those countries. I mean, when you look at Iraq today, when you look at Syria, when you look at Libya, God knows what's going to happen with Iran, right? Does anyone think that any of these places are a better place because America intervened in them? When you look at Libya, and look, this wasn't Trump, and it just wasn't Bush. Let's not forget, Libya and Syria were Obama, right? So many of the people who are like, I see this crazy hashtag trending like, I voted for Hillary in response to what like Trump is doing to Iran, like forgetting that Hillary Clinton, they were the architects of Libya and Syria. So for me, this cuts across party lines, but it also touches on a lot of people's integrity. So if you're against Bush, you're against Trump, I hope that you are also against the Democratic Party, who are back too. This cuts across party lines. I don't have no problem saying that because I can give two shits about either party. They're the same, right? So for me, the world would be a better place with less U.S. intervention, and I would say with no U.S. intervention. The U.S., if there's any place the United States needs to intervene in North Philly, intervene in Los Angeles, intervene in Chicago. You know what I mean? I remember years ago after 2001, when they were talking, 2003, when they were talking about how much they were putting aside to rebuild Iraq after they destroyed and invaded. Someone from Cincinnati, like a city council member, said, "Hey, look, I wish the United States would wage war on my district, so that they could put aside a couple $1 billion, bomb us, please bomb East Cincinnati, wherever he was from, and then come in with billions of dollars to rebuild our district, because we need it, right?" I mean, it was irony, but it was just, it perfectly captured, what we're talking about. So, yeah, the world would be, the United States is not a defender of freedom. Libya, Syria, Iraq. Look, I'm not gonna sit here and say that I would wanted to live under Gaddafi. I would have wanted to live under Saddam Hussein, or I would want to live under Assad. I would be someone who would be in prison, right? But I would be someone who would have been in prison for challenging authoritarianism wherever it is in the world. So so I just want to put that out there. But these countries are not better because of the United States intervening in them, and the world would be a much better place with less U.S. intervention. Your question back there, unfortunately, is a very difficult question because it's dealing with putting food on people's table, right? But if there's one thing that could be done is organizing, and there could be other industries that come into those territories that do not involve imprisoning people. So maybe that's something that the community who is opposed to it should organize and say, look, we don't want a black site. We don't want a detention center here. We want, that would be for the community to decide. There certainly could be other industries that could come in. For me, that's something that the community should organize around. And I'm just thinking of that as an organizer. That's something that I would look for. So you're gonna have to use your imagination with people in the area. What do we want besides a prison? Always have an alternative that you could organize and people around. And I agree with you, kill lists are bad. I don't know enough of what you're talking about, right? I'm familiar with the kill list. I know that American citizens are on them. And I remember a civil lawsuit, someone's family put an American citizen, I think he's still somewhere out there, but he basically challenged, like, why am I on this kill list? I'm an American citizen. And I think that they wanted him to turn himself into an American embassy, and his lawyer was like, he's on the kill list. Why would he walk into an embassy that's trying to kill him? So that is serious. I'm making a little light of it, but I don't really know enough to answer your question about that. But yes, the United States does have a kill list. It's bad, and I think that you would probably be someone that could talk about it better. And if I missed any other question, I apologize.
I'd just like to address my Jamon sister. Thank you for your question. My personal opinion on this is that we are in late stage capitalism and the society is collapsing. It hasn't worked for people around the world for a long time, and now finally the chickens are coming home here, and it's not working for a lot of people here, but actually there's people here who it never worked for, and who were ignored and overlooked, and their suffering and their oppression was invisible, or made invisible, or ignored. So as long as there's a society that's based on greed and profit, then what you're describing is going to keep happening, but the noose is tightening, and it's becoming increasingly unworkable. And I actually think that if you look around the world, there's revolutions happening because people are rising up against these systems. They're cranking down harder with more wars because they're trying to squeeze out every last drop of profit they can while they can. And but you're also talking about genocide, and that's another layer on top of everything. And I have friends from Guam. I'm actually going to Mauna Kea in about a month to assist in the medical tent. So the thing that I've been talking about with my indigenous friends is, well, and really we're all talking about this, is how do we decolonize ourselves of the oppressor and victim patterns that make it hard for us to think about what to do. Fresh thinking is what's necessary right now. And see, I just went blank. I said that I went blank, right? And my little colonized header went blank. Yeah. So I think the point in this moment is, also I wanted to say, I do not like either of these parties in this country right now. I'm also a realist. I live in a moment right now, and I'm trying to stop the ceiling from killing people as it comes down. So I'm not gonna, and I'm not implying anyone else in this room is saying this either. I think we're all sort of trying to save people in the collapse. And, but like, I have a very dear friend here who's a national organizer for Bernie. And she has a long history of putting her ass on the line for people. And I know she believes really strongly there, and I'm really interested actually because he's one of the people who's come out very strongly for anti-detention immigrant rights. And I think he's gonna challenge others to do. Do I agree with him on everything? I don't know enough, frankly. And that's part of my work to do. And the last thing I just wanna say, my brother here said it, which was, we gotta organize. It's always the answer. You gotta organize, organize, organize. And that is where we do that's our work to do, to find our agency back, our own voice. And like when I talk to my friends in Hawaii, the Native folks, look what's going on there right now. In spite of the incredible economic, psychological, and physical violence that's been done to try to wipe them out, they're rising up. And they're having their own thinking, and they're reclaiming their own culture, and they're finding new solutions. So that's actually, I think, a model for everyone to look at. When you look at Kapu Aloha, the nonviolence movement coming out of Mauna Kea, that's a model for humanity. And that's what I'm talking about. There's a sacredness to every human being. If we connect to that, we find power that terrifies the oppressors. And in that place, there's possibility of transformation for everybody. And so we want to heal ourselves and reclaim enough of ourselves so that when this thing goes down, that it doesn't just recycle and repeat itself again. That there's people to step forward and say, you know what, we're not going to do it that way this time. So that's what my thoughts on it are.
So I want to just offer a couple of quick concluding remarks. One around the idea of recidivism and more broadly the narrative. And in a lot of the work that I do, I look at the ways that narratives serve to justify, problematic policies, Islamophobic policies, right, xenophobic policies. And when you look at the concept of recidivism specifically when it comes to Guantanamo, the idea there is not only to reinforce the perception that those that are in Guantanamo committed a crime, it's also to say that their reaction to being abused and tortured is somehow different and somehow more irrational and barbaric than how any other group would sort of respond had they been in a similar circumstance, right? So that narrative, that particular narrative, is used very strategically to both reinforce a narrative about Guantanamo prisoners and to separate them from sort of the rest of humanity. I also think, I don't want to elaborate much on the kill list, but it is usually referred to, or I guess in the technical term, it's referred to as the disposition matrix, right? That's pretty much a euphemism, right? No one would think that the disposition matrix is a set of names that, under the Obama administration, in what was called Terror Tuesdays, were those who were going to be targeted for extrajudicial assassination. So there's, again, a way that the narrative is used very strategically in that context, right? And so I think overall, what?
Those people actually get killed?
On occasion, yes. Yeah. So I think that, one of the themes in this panel has been around narratives, right? And again, they are very important because they shape our perceptions and understandings of the justice and injustice that our communities face. I want to highlight quick the timeline that you've seen in the back of the room, and that is a project that I worked on with Justice for Muslims Collective and a group called the Sanctuaries. And I conceptualize this timeline as a way of bringing together all of the various policies and laws of the war on terror. If we think of how hard it is to connect different struggles and different movements, we can start by connecting the war on terror to itself. It's rare that people think about how does torture relate to the Muslim ban? How does it relate to surveillance, right? How does the proxy war in Yemen, arms deals with Saudi Arabia, how does that come back to the Iraq war? How does it come back to AFRICOM, et cetera, right? So this project in and of itself was designed to do what we need to multiply, which is to think about what are the ways that all of these injustices are connected, and how do we use our understanding of that to push for collective liberation. I want to end by thanking all of the panelists. I'm just